I live in Australia. Roughly a year ago, I was sitting at a bench in a park surrounded by woodland. I was watching my daughter play on the equipment until some movement to my right caught my eye. Something darted behind a tree trunk. I kept watching, thinking maybe it was a wallaby or something, but boy, was I wrong. I looked back at my daughter and then absent-mindedly looked around again at the tree trunk. And there was a gnome. That's the only way I can describe it. It was a type of tiny person, maybe 30 centimeters tall. But what is most unbelievable is that it really did look like a garden gnome. Red hat, rosy cheeks, and I remember it had darkly colored lips. It was looking at me with what I can only describe as a malevolent look. It looked evil. I saw it for about 5 to 10 seconds before something caused me to quickly look back at my daughter. And when I looked back, the gnome was gone. So I immediately took my daughter home. I suffered terrible anxiety and nightmares after that. I had this fear that the gnome hitched a ride with us home, and that it was constantly watching me from around corners and moving items around the house. Definitely one of the weirdest things I have ever seen in my life. I don't know if my mind created the image of the gnome or what, but what I felt was not friendly. When I was around 17 in the late 90s, my best friend Jenna and I went camping with a bunch of friends in Algonquin Park, which is a huge conservation area in northern Ontario. We were supposed to meet the rest of our friends early that evening at the main camp area, but Jenna and I were late, and by the time we were driving into the park, it was already pitch dark. There are no streetlights or any lights at all out there, so we couldn't see anything at this point but what was directly inside the light of our car's high beams, which was basically just the dirt road a few feet in front of us and the odd sign that told us to continue on to the camp area and keep to the road. We were driving very slowly. If I strained my eyes, I could just barely make out the outline of trees on either side of us. It was pretty spooky, but we weren't worried about anything at this point, and we're just excited about our trip. But then something entered the light of the high beams. At first, I thought it was a wolf, but when Jenna slammed on the brakes, it reared up and looked right at us. And I'll never forget this. It was definitely not a wolf. It looked more like one of those dog creatures from the first Ghostbusters movie, except it was walking on its hind legs. It was short, maybe 4 foot tall, and it seemed to be wearing clothing. A dark coat and a small pointed red cap. I can't remember its face that well, but I remember having the strong feeling that it was evil. Right away, Jenna yelled out, "What the hell?" And the creature shot back into the darkness. At this point, Jenna was about to turn the car after the thing, but I grabbed the steering wheel and said, "No way." Jenna was a bit annoyed after that. She's always been an adrenaline junkie, and I know she would have gone after that thing if I hadn't been there. But luckily, I was able to convince her to just let it go. We met up with the rest of our friends at the campsite soon after and told them what happened, but no one believed us. Jenna has always had a prankster personality and would sometimes make up far-fetched stories just to see if people would believe her, and then tease them if they fell for it. So it was basically a boy who cried wolf situation. I felt very uncomfortable now about sleeping overnight with that thing loose in the woods. I hardly slept at all that night, and at one point I thought I heard shuffling and scratching noises outside our tent. I guess it could have been an animal, but I had a really bad feeling, like something was watching us. The next day, we took a canoe out to another campsite further away, and this one didn't give me that same anxious feeling, but I was still on edge. After a few days, I told Jenna I wasn't feeling well and wanted to cut the trip short. So Jenna and I packed up and headed back along the same road we came in on, but this time during the day, so we could see the forest and the road clearly. And what I saw on the way back made my blood run cold. On either side of that road, there was a steep decline, with trees declining down both sides into a ravine. If Jenna had followed that creature like she wanted to, we would have went careening straight down that hill and probably crashed the car. If we had even survived that crash, who knows what would have happened to us. I mean, that thing could have come out of the woods and, I don't know, dragged us out of the car or something. Sometimes when I think about it, I wonder if the creature walked into our high beams on purpose. Like maybe it was trying to lure us off the side of the road. A little backstory. When I was 15 years old, I lived in a farming town in northern New York. My father is a hardworking and productive member of society, even though I grew up fairly poor. We spent our fall season in the woods hunting for a hefty white-tailed deer to feed the family for most of the winter. We would usually go out around 3:30 p.m. once I got home from school and he from work, and stay out until dark, which would come around 6 o'clock. One night of the season of 2006 particularly stands out in my mind. Fast forward to around 5 o'clock. As the sun got lower in the sky, the snow-covered woods took on a hazy grayish color, and it became increasingly hard to distinguish shapes. So I descended my tree to sort of refresh my vision. As I carefully and quietly descended, I heard a crunching sound coming from my left, just about the area my father was sitting. I thought, awesome, we can get out of this creepiness now. So I picked up my pace, making as little noise as possible when I hit the ground, though all hope of going home shifted to worry. I looked over in the direction of the crunching snow and expected to see my father. Instead, what I saw was the black outline of the biggest behemoth of a white-tailed deer that I have ever seen, about 100 yards away. With my hand shaking, I pulled my rifle up to align a shot, but it changed, like melted into a figure that was not a deer at all, except for the antlers. It was bipedal and hunched over. I blinked and looked back through the scope because I thought it was some kind of illusion or something. But it was not an illusion. It was gangly, hunched over and not moving, with fur all over, and an elongated head with antlers. Still doubting what I'm looking at, I shouted, "Hey!" with sight still on it. It stood up, and when it did, I saw just how huge it was. Probably around 7 feet tall or so, and really skinny with long arms. Also, it had a snout like a deer and fang-like teeth bared. It startled me. I took a hurried shot and booked out of there, not looking back. Then, about a quarter of the way home, I heard yelling and 3 shots coming from the woods. So I stopped and looked back for the first time to see my dad bursting out of the woods, yelling for me to run home. When we got there, we waited to catch our breath before going inside to see my mother. While we were catching our breath, he told me never to talk about whatever I saw out there. But I wanted to share this because a few months ago, a friend of mine asked me, "Have you heard anything about a huge black deer someone spotted on your road?" I just wonder if it's the same thing, and it terrifies me. I grew up in a really small rural New England town, and during the summers of my teenage years, out of sheer boredom, I would take long, long walks out by myself, sometimes lasting from sunrise to sunset. One of the greatest things about living in New England is that you can pretty much go anywhere. The landowners and farmers don't care if you cross their fields or go in their woods as long as it's not hunting season. If they see you do it, they just wave and keep on baling hay or whatever. That particular summer, I was growing bolder, going further and further out, and I explored a lot of cool places. But the weirdest by far was this old rocky hill I'd seen a few times in the distance, and had always wanted to climb since I was a kid. It had taken me a few hours to get to the base by following an old set of railroad tracks that had fallen into disrepair. I'd been having an off day and was in a bad mood. I'd left later than I intended and had to turn back to grab my old blue lunchbox because I'd forgotten it at home. It was mid-morning and I'd finally made it out and was impatient for the really exciting part of the hike. There was a farmer's field not too far away to the left, and this giant hill was on the right with the woods growing up to the train tracks. I remember pausing before going in because something felt a little off. I don't hesitate often before starting off on a hike, but I don't know, the woods just felt a little odd that day. Like the air felt sharp is the only real adjective I can think of. Well, naturally it didn't stop me. I mean, I paused, yes, but immediately dismissed that feeling of foreboding as a symptom of a late breakfast. I wasn't warmed up yet and just needed to get my blood pumping. The terrain was much more difficult than anything I'd encountered before that summer. Like I had sloshed my way through bogs, trudged through miles of exposed fields under blistering suns and bugs, but this time it was just crazy. The undergrowth barred my path at every turn. Pricker bushes, blade grass, and burdock seeds made me regret wearing shorts that day. And all the while I had this buzzing in the back of my head that something just didn't feel right. I wasn't making headway like I should, and the sun was barely moving in the sky. When I finally reached the top of the big hill, I took a much-needed rest on a big rock. It was kind of angular. After looking around a bit, I noticed that, in fact, the entire hilltop was covered in these big angular rocks. It was a fully grown forest filled with tons of undergrowth and a dozen swampy pools the size of bathtubs. But in some places, the stones almost looked like they made up a really, really old stone foundation. I didn't know what to make of it. I'd seen ruined old buildings in the woods before, but nothing that looked like it had been cut out from the bedrock. All this was putting me increasingly ill at ease, and the tension in the air was getting worse. I couldn't shake the feeling that I just simply shouldn't be there. So I made a decision, got up and started walking fast with the intention of circling around to the other side of the hill and coming down on the opposite end of the farmer's field so I wouldn't have to fight my way through the woods again. But as I started walking, I heard a loud crash somewhere in the distance, and I froze. I remember thinking, oh crap, is it hunting season? Is that a farmer thinking I'm an animal? They'll shoot just about anything that moves up this way. So instinctively, I ducked down and sort of crab walked my way backwards into a bush while the noise got louder. I'll never forget what I saw next. I blinked my eyes a few times in confusion. Something was crashing its way through the underbrush. It had taken me half an hour to navigate. But that wasn't the weirdest part. The weirdest part was that once it got closer, I saw that it looked like me. It was me, or I don't know, whatever it was, looked exactly like me. Right down to the blue jean cutoff shorts and red t-shirt I was wearing. It even had the battered blue lunchbox I'd forgotten that morning. And it was running fast, faster than I could have ever moved, even without the undergrowth being there. I held perfectly still under my bush as it tore off down the hill in the direction I'd come. It didn't slow down and never looked back. The entire encounter only took a few seconds from the crash till whatever it was out of sight, but I held still another 10 to 15 minutes before standing up and quickly moving in the opposite direction. Getting down the hill was just as difficult as it was coming up, but I made it out without any incident. I spent the rest of the day looking over my shoulder, and the signs posted all over the trees saying "No trespassing" took on a whole new meaning for me. Looking back, I kind of think it might have been trying to catch up with me for some reason. I shuddered to imagine why. I haven't been back to the hill in years, but it remains one of the few places in my old town where the forest isn't being cut down for housing developments. Sometimes I wonder if there's a very good reason for that. Thanks for watching, and thanks to the Redditors who gave me permission to read their stories, as well as the subscribers who sent their stories in to be read. In the description you'll find more details about which story is which, as well as links to the Reddit stories. More and more of you have been sending in your true fairy / strange unidentified humanoid experiences, and I just want to give a special thanks to you guys because I love reading these more than the Reddit stories, and I hope you'll keep sending them to me, and they can all eventually end up in a video. So I'd like to thank all the new subscribers and welcome you guys to the channel. I've got a lot of new videos planned, so please like, subscribe if you're new, comment, and share. Until next time, this has been a visit from your scary Fairy Godmother.